Well, hello, everyone. Again, good morning and good afternoon to anyone joining us live or anyone watching this recording later. Welcome to Tech Canada's Deeper Insights webinar series. I'm Katrin Popescu, Marketing and Communications Manager at Tech Canada, and I'm very pleased to host the latest installment of our series. Our webinars are designed to highlight timely topics and equip business leaders, like many of you, with the latest insights to strategically approach the complex issues and business uncertainty that surrounds us. Today, we explore something that's likely been on most leaders' minds, the megatrends shaping our country's economy. To facilitate this conversation, we have the pleasure of welcoming Namir Anani, President and CEO of the Information and Communications Technology Council. Welcome, Namir. He will explore the megatrends shaping Canada's economy in the next few years and look at how businesses can better position themselves to leverage the full potential of this environment. We know that we live in an era of rapid disruption, where global forces are now demanding our full attention. Emerging economies, geopolitical inflections, health risks, cyber threats, and the changing employment prospects are now top of mind. Please know that as we progress throughout today's webinar, you can enter any questions that you might have for Namir in the chat feature on the platform that you're watching us on, and we'll be sure to bring them up. We'll find some natural pauses in there. The session will also be recorded for future viewing, so if you're not catching us live, it will also be available on our YouTube channel before the end of the week. Namir, welcome to our Deeper Insights webinar series. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Katrinelle, and certainly delighted to be here. Good morning to everyone, or good afternoon, depending where you are in the country. Certainly delighted to be here and to exchange on a subject of interest to all of us, and that's how do we tackle the new normal and the digital imperative? How does that play in a digital arena or digital era? To give you a feel of where some of the information that I'll be sharing with you comes from, let me just start by explaining the role of my organization. So we're a national center of expertise for the digital economy with the aim of advancing Canada's digital advantage in a global context, meaning that we help Canada achieve its aspirations in the digital space through some of the research and policy advice that can extend from autonomous vehicles to blockchain to artificial intelligence, right to foreign direct investment and IP protection. And the second part, which is a critical component of our organization, is the capacity building. So we help organizations transform digitally, but also help Canadians acquire the skills to be part of the economy of today and tomorrow. So as Katrinelle mentioned, I think the topic today is how do we manage in this new normal, and specifically that to set it in the context, definitely we are in an era of rapid disruption and global forces are demanding our full attention. And as highlighted, from food security to cybersecurity to supply chain logistic disruptions to geopolitical conflicts, health risk, to changing nature of the nature of employment as well, or putting different emphasis on where the economy is going and what are the global forces shaping that, and all come against the backdrop of digital technologies and innovations in that space that are transforming industries, and frankly, transforming industries faster than economies can adjust. So how do we reflect on that environment? What are the socioeconomic global trends or mega trends, but also what are the industrial trends in this space? And given also that climate change is one of the biggest endeavor that we're facing in the next number of years. And obviously, as you're probably following the COP27 event and much of the discussions that are happening into that. So let me share some of the slides with you, and then we can expand on this environment. I hope you can see my slides on that. So if we go to some of the global socioeconomic trends that are facing us, for the next number of years, at least to 2030 and beyond. Many of you, I'm sure, are aware that we are in an era of shifting economic power, that as much as we are part of a G7 economy, that the E7 or the emerging E7 economies are actually fast-tracking their development and capabilities and much of their industrial fabric. And that includes China and India and Brazil, even smaller countries like Turkey as well in that space. So it's important to look in that arena in terms of the global shift in the economic power as well. And if you look at the emerging economies, that since 1995, the whole GDP outputs was about half of what the G7 economies created. By 2040, the E7 economies are expected to be double what the G7 are. So I think it's worth keeping an eye on that, specifically that much of 80% of those economies, in these economies, 80% will be mostly in the middle class type with high buying power in that environment. The second aspect is the climate change and resource scarcity. I think we're all very cognizant of what's happening in this environment in terms of you look at much of the broader based studies out there that we as a global environment, we're emitting approximately 50 tons of CO2 equivalents per year. And obviously all of that contributing to the 1.5 degree rise that we're trying to mitigate and reverse as an action. But obviously the climate change and climate change solutions that are looking at two different parameters. One, it's the mitigation of this environment in terms of how do we adjust to reverse or stop the climate change. But the second part of it is the adaptation aspect in terms of, a good example is how do you create the crop and yield of the future where some vegetations are able to acquire or grow with less water or with water scarcity, but also more resistant to pests, more resistant to heat in that environment. So that's mainly the adaptation concepts. And there's a lot of investment happening into that space. As we know, the World Economic Forum and other broad-based studies have indicated that from now till we look by 2040 in a reversal of the 1.5 degree temperature increase, that the world will need to spend approximately $2 trillion per year in that. So as much as it is an environmental and a social responsibility, it's also an economic opportunity for Canada to look into that environment and keep that in terms of, and I always say, well, how do we turn the net zero carbon challenge to a net economic gain for Canada? And it's an important dimension to reflect on going forward. Technological breakthroughs from the artificial intelligence that it's playing in every sector of our Canadian economy and worldwide in terms of the automation, the robotics, and Industry 5.0, where the cobots or the robots are interacting with humans to provide the last customization capabilities in that environment, right to the blockchain, which is really disrupting not only the financial sector, but it's creating an environment of looking at food security, supply chain efficiencies. And given that much of Canada is involved in trade with our trading partners, obviously slowing down or simplifying the transactions capabilities and the touch points are going to be important for the efficiency of trade and investment in that space, and blockchain is going to be a critical component of that environment. And obviously, as many of you have heard of 3D printing, the disrupting the manufacturing industry, and virtual and augmented reality that's playing in the metaverse and the changing environment that we're facing currently. The fourth space that I want to talk about before going into the industrial components in terms of the megatrends is the demographic and social change. it's interesting to know that, there's again evidence that the population of the Earth by 2050 will be about 10 billion. Add to that some food scarcity, water scarcity, and much of the aging population in North America compared to, in fact, the E7 countries where the larger population will be below the 30-year-old in that. So it gives you an indication of how the shift in the demographics, but the shift in buying power, shift in the consumer behavior in a global environment. The last is rapid urbanization. I think most of us would have expected, given the pandemic environment, that much of us potentially were thinking of moving outside the cities. The rush to urbanization has been actually still going and going very strong. But we're talking about megacities, and much of these megacities, interestingly, are in Asia, but there is a lot of development happening in Canada and the US, and then also in Mexico as well in that space. But it's expected that by 2045, that 66% of the world population will live in megacities that actually represent less than 5% of the space on Earth, and ultimately generating 75% of the GDP worldwide. So it gives you an indication where much of why there is a lot of focus on smart city development, capabilities and connected vehicles and others to make sure that the economy continues to turn, because mobility continues to be, whether it's people, public, or goods, are very essential for any high-performing economy. Let me now dive into the global industrial trends. And as I mentioned, we're looking for a 20-30-minute presentation, and then happy to open it for questions on that. So please think about, what questions you'd like to ask, and I'll be delighted to respond to that. So many of us have obviously been hearing about the energy disruption. Much of the world economy has been fueled by fossil fuel capabilities, some nuclear energy and that. But obviously, there is a lot of investments taking place in the renewable energy, solar, wind, hydroelectric, and many other factors. Hydrogen is becoming a critical component, and you've seen the recent announcement by the government with the collaboration with Germany into producing in Atlantic Canada green hydrogen. Now, green hydrogen is not originated from fossil type energy, but it's actually water through electrolysis. It separates H2O, the hydrogen, to the oxygen, and creates clean hydrogen or green hydrogen compared to the blue hydrogen that has its background from natural gas. That's through a steam reforming capability creates hydrogen that they call blue hydrogen. Still clean hydrogen, but it does create carbon footprint ultimately compared to the green one, and the green one that is being looked at not only in Canada but internationally. The significance of this is that while electric vehicles are going to be the future, green hydrogen is going to play a bigger component as well in the fuel cells for much of the mobility in the future, but also in building, heating, and many of the manufacturing capabilities. Add to that the small modular reactors. It's an innovation that is creating a lot of buzz around the world because there is a considerable look and feel that potentially renewables and any type of capabilities of hydrogen and others may not suffice in terms of the energy consumption, that we have to look at smaller modular reactors, nuclear reactors, that are able to generate between 10 to 300 megawatts of capability with cleaner approaches in the environment than potentially existing reactors around the world. If I look at the climate solutions, the right-hand side of this slide, I would say that, it's not only the renewables that are becoming at the forefront of this discussion. There's much happening in terms of products and capabilities that replace the fossil type developments, like bioplastics, which uses biomass, and much of the recycled food products, much of the vegetable oils or vegetable fat that's then developed into the bioplastics that are very much biodegradable compared to the plastic products that we have now. Interestingly, there's a lot of development happening in the place of cement and bricks. So much of our economy is built on that. The brick and mortar constitutes much of what our economy is based on. But cement, as we all know, generates approximately 8% of CO2 emissions as well. So you have companies like Biomason and others that are using the same nature capabilities of creating coral reef by using microbes to then generate bricks and generate cement that has a much longer longevity and half-life of continuity within the manufacturing, but ultimately emits very much low carbon emission. All of that to say that there's many advancements in that space, not on the energy side only, but also on the products that would replace our existing products that were originally manufactured through fossil products and resources. The agri-food industry is seeing tremendous change, and you must have heard here and around the world that there is a lot of focus on vertical farming because of the capability of using less water, but also with the really sophisticated capabilities of artificial intelligence, analyzers, machine learning, and lighting capabilities to be able to create food products and create supply chains in food that are all year round and be able to provide that capability for Canada and around the world as well. But you're seeing technology playing a bigger component of this in the hydroponics, but also in measuring the pH, measuring the pesticide, the CO2, the oxygen within the environment, and hence be able to produce better yield all year round and meet the demands of the rising population on Earth for the next number of years. Health bioproducts quickly, health and biotech is seeing through technology a whole new shift in this environment, from regenerative medicine or tissue engineering by using the human body to be able to regenerate some of the scars or regenerate some of the body tissue, but also to the vaccine development that obviously we've seen in the last number of years as a result of the pandemic, but also to a lot of the remote diagnostics, remote monitoring, the wearable devices, pre-hospitalization, post-hospitalization, and the use of data to be able to do much more sophisticated capabilities of understanding the effect of medication on larger population, or effective medication comparative to certain individuals as well. So, or effective medication, on certain populations as well. So there is a lot of development happening in that space, and add to that the capabilities of advanced robotics. I talked about it a little bit earlier in terms of Industry 5.0 and the cobots, but it's shaping and changing our economy quite rapidly. Then you have the transport evolution, and obviously from the hydro loop, that there's a lot of discussion on that, but also the electrification. And that's also, it's not only in the vehicles that we use as private vehicles, but also micromobility. You've seen electric bikes, you've seen scooters that are being used to solve the first mile and the last mile of transportation. And interestingly, I was at a conference yesterday talking about that, and we've had some representatives from different economies, and representation from Calgary, but also from Estonia, looking at how to make sure that we are creating the first mile and the last mile to really compete with our engagement factor with using our own transportation. So really get us to, or force us to use more of public transportation, as long as obviously to manage the tarification processes and others to get us to be more engaging in this transportation revolution that is happening around the world. The last I wanted to talk about is the Internet of Value. Some of you must have heard that through blockchain, cryptocurrencies, NFTs, but there's something shaping up called the Web 3.0 economy. So far in the first Web 1 and Web 2, it was mostly being able to share information or to publish information. Now the Web 3.0, and thanks to the advent of blockchain, creates a whole new capabilities of being able to create token economies, to turn any aspect of your business into value that you're able to market it and be able to create communities that exchange on that. And you're seeing tokens are being created for communities in California that coming together through the power of blockchain and the creation of token capabilities to be able to use their solar generation or wind to exchange some of that power between them. And if I'm offsetting the power of somebody else, then I would earn tokens compared to somebody else that may be using that energy from me. And that allows me in the future to use my tokens to also use clean energy from different sources on that. But that economy is happening at the moment, and I think you have to keep an eye on it in terms of where that progression is happening, and what is the power not only of AI or quantum computing that is coming up quite fast, but also blockchain and all the disruption that's happening in the financial system at the moment in terms of improving transactions, lowering the cost of transactions, improving efficiencies, improving supply chains. And obviously, all of those matter to businesses, depending where you are in the retail industry or the manufacturing industry, or even in the health sector, in terms of tracking health diagnostics, health data, because blockchain provides you the capability of having time-stamped, very secure, but also immutable data that you cannot change it after it's being created in that. To talk a little bit about, and then I'll stop at that and maybe we can open it for Q&A, is that in this, in the last 2.5 years, we've seen a rapid adoption of technologies. While many sectors of the Canadian economies felt the full brunt of this environment, from travel to hospitality and retail as well, others, as they adopted technology, not only survived, but started to thrive in that space. You've seen manufacturing adopting lights out manufacturing, meaning that they can operate at any time of the day, using automation and robotics as well, to 3D printing. But you're also seeing the rise of e-commerce, the adoption of much of the technology in the construction industry. And also we've seen it in recent years, even the hospitality industry is obviously ramping up into that space in terms of your pre-arrival and post-arrival capabilities and payments and adjustment in terms of how do you get to the room, what facilities, what capabilities you want at your destination, ultimately on that. All to say is that we've seen a rise in the demand for skills and for jobs. If you look at this graph, you can see that since February 2020, we've seen, compared to the total employment in all industries in the economy, while GDP recovered as a result of much of the stimulus packages from government, but also the Bank of Canada interventions, the economy recovered to about, and jobs to about 2.7%. But the job rise in employment in the digital space rose to about 20%, way above even pre-pandemic levels in that environment, indicative of the acceleration in terms of adoption of technology. And there's a lot of research indicating that in the last 3 years, Canada has adopted technology faster than it has in the last 10 to 20 years in that space. So it gives you an indication where the focus should be in terms of adopting, doubling down on technology, because even in an era of high inflation, even in an era of global conflicts and geopolitical inflections, supply chain, logistic, challenges, technology is going to help you, pave a better pathway forward and create a better environment in terms of helping you improve your productivity, your innovation factor, but also the yield of your product. And while understanding as well as the size of the markets and being able to respond to that market in terms of scale and scope. I'll stop here and would love to hear any questions that you have and respond to your different questions in this space. Thank you.
Thank you, Namir. At the moment, there are no questions from the audience. We do have a lot of individuals both online live and here on Zoom joining us. So again, feel free to type in your questions. We would love to hear them and give Namir an opportunity to speak to them. But in the meantime, Namir, perhaps a couple questions from my end. You had talked a lot about these mega trends in business, everything from transportation to what we're seeing in the in the hospitals. Can you speak a little bit more specifically to how you're seeing them translated to Canada and Canada's economy? I know you had given us the example of Norway and how Norway's doing. And of course, we always know that those Nordic countries are always miles ahead of larger, vaster countries like Canada and what they're able to achieve. How are you seeing some of those mega trends translated to our industries here in Canada?
Yeah, I mean, I think through our own research, interestingly, as I talked about, the green environment and the climate change solutions, we're seeing a lot of that developing in Canada. And obviously, as you heard recently, the collaboration between Germany and Canada in terms of the development of green hydrogen, which is going to be a critical component in the future to supply that to Europe, that, its origins, it's only water. Ultimately, it's not fossil energy or fossil products to create that. We're seeing some of the development in the health tech capabilities in remote diagnostic, remote monitoring, and that accelerated as a result of the pandemic, because we become more in a contact-free economy. And, as not only us, but other economies are facing that. We've seen also a lot of adoption of automation and robotics in the manufacturing industry and autonomous space. There's a lot of work in Quebec and BC and others in Alberta in terms of how do you mobilize and create the pathways for success in autonomous, but electrification and others. And interestingly, Canada is incredibly well positioned in terms of the essential minerals that are needed to create those batteries of the future. So obviously, it's important for us to start to think, well, what are the competitive advantages that Canada has compared to other countries, and how do we position better? in collaboration with other countries on electric vehicles, on health, digital health, on the development of the manufacturing industry or Industry 5.0. So I think it's going to be for us in the next number of years a positioning environment. How do we best position based on the strength of the capabilities that we have? And maybe to conclude on that, I would say what makes us very attractive as an economy? Apart from essential minerals and others, we have a very strong base talent in Canada, supported by very strong academic and very reputable academic institutions. Great R&D capabilities within these academic institutions that are favorable to attracting investment. We have a stable financial as well and fiscal, compared to other countries. In fact, we still, despite the high debt to GDP, better than other peer countries that we're dealing with. And why is this important? Because ultimately, for foreign investments or foreign direct investment to come to Canada, they need to know that we still maintain the rating of Moody or AAA, and we're still a stable, a strong financial fiscal economy that they can base their future products and capabilities for the long term. So I think we're positioned well. We just have to create the impetus for it and move to the next step.
Fantastic. Yeah, thank you. A couple follow-up questions to that. You've asked some really great questions, and a lot of our tech members who are leaders across this country bring a lot of these webinars into their meetings. What might be some questions that they can further ask themselves or bring into their organizations to say, are we thinking about this? Are we thinking about this? How are we positioning ourselves differently? What would you encourage them to ask within their own organizations or of themselves as leaders within their industries?
I would say three things, critical three things that are predominantly the questions I get asked by CEOs, but it's our research as well in that environment. I think there are many factors. The CEOs can look at my innovation factor or others, but I would say start with knowing your data. I think being able to understand your business through the lens of the data that you have can open up new opportunities, either understanding how to improve the productivity factor of the business, but also how to understand what markets that you can expand in and scale and scope. All is going to be important. If you're in the retail business, knowing the power of the market, the buying power of the demographics, it's going to be important. Knowing your business and data to position better in terms of productivity, whether you're in the supply chain, whether you're in purely in the manufacturing of products or the health sector, all I think data, and we are in a data economy, but use the data to your power. Two, I would say, double down on technology adoption. And there is sometimes a reticence by business leaders to say, well, we are in an inflationary period. We are already debt laden. Do we increase that debt by investment in technology? Technology has been an enabler, whether in an economy that's contracting or expanding. I would say, look at your business needs, adopt where necessary. It can't be the panacea for everything, but there are targeted and surgical, different capabilities that technology can help you in expanding your business. The third one I would say is invest in your talent. Make sure that you reskill and upskill your talent, because ultimately economies and industries and all the innovation factor is made by your talent. And there's so much happening in the speed of change that almost every three years, there's some new development that's happening in that space. So put some aside in terms of investing in reskilling and upskilling in these capabilities. I would be delighted to help if you need more information on that. So to summarize, know your data, double down on technology adoption and invest in your skills.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thanks for going into such depth with that depth in that. I know that your organization provides some really valuable tools for leaders. Can you maybe share with our audience joining us and tuning in much later what some of those tools are?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, so we provide a lot of research insights, but also policy advice. From what is needed to invest in electric vehicles, what are the strengths in Canada vis-a-vis other countries, how is the labor market positioning, what are the skills need. So again, it speaks to the three areas I mentioned. Such information will help you position better to say, yeah, if I'm entering this market or part of this ecosystem, because ultimately you may not be manufacturing autonomous vehicles, but you may be creating batteries for these, or components of these batteries, components of these vehicles, or the LiDAR, or the capabilities of sensory devices. You need to know what skills are needed in that space and how do you position your organization to that. So those reports provide you a really good idea of what's happening in that environment and how to position better. But also a lot of our reports, for instance, we've got reports on foreign direct investment that we've done in the last number of years. And interestingly, one of the areas, as much as I talked about the E7 countries, Europe, we have created the CETA agreement, the Comprehensive European Trade Agreement, that was ratified a number of years ago, to a market of approximately 450 million people and 14.4 trillion euro economy per year. Let's say, the equivalency between the US and the euro is almost at par, so it's almost 14.6 trillion per year. Compared to our economy of 1.9 trillion, you can see that the size of the economy in Europe is just quite significant. Yet, there were very few companies that knew that there are so much tremendous opportunities for them to infiltrate the European markets. And interestingly, the reverse is also true, that some of the European markets did not know that there are capabilities in Canada to be able to establish. So our reports provide that in terms of if you want to expand your reach beyond Canada, reach out to us or see our reports in terms of some of the information to tell you what are the markets and capabilities abroad on that, as much as the skills, as much as the digital maturity that you need to adopt, and what are the transformational technologies that you need to adopt to help you expand your business from construction to retail to e-commerce to manufacturing to health sector. All is provided by our reports. And also the capabilities in terms of training. We have a lot of programs. Reach out to us on that. Some of it funded by federal government, provincial, and others by the industry that help skills development. So specifically, if you're in the small, medium enterprises, and you're looking of how do I upskill, reach out to us. We'll provide you some entry into these programs. Some of it actually have wage subsidies to help your organization not only acquire talent, but have that talent for a period, at least the wage subsidies paid for up to 6 months. But we've seen that the more that talent is developed and has the face value with the industry and made their mark in the industry, the retention level is quite high in that space. So happy to respond to any of these questions and for the industry to reach out to us, and we provide you these insights, but also the capabilities and tools.
Thank you. And of course, we'll be sure to link out to your website so that leaders watching this webinar and having further questions can know exactly who to contact. Curious though, you had talked about a lot of reports that you post on there. How often do you update those?
Quite often. In fact, if you look at our website, almost every 3 months we have a new report coming out. And the range of reports go from, I would say, technological, technology development, from 5G, blockchain to autonomous and electric vehicles, on a provincial, federal, on national level, but also international. We're also looking internationally, but also policy advice in terms of what are the incentives to attract investment in Canada, what would be the right approaches, how to protect your IP protection, and many other facets of that. So the frequency of publications are quite frequent for us. And we're an organization that we're started small. We were, I would say, when I joined, we were about a handful of employees. We now over 100 and something across Canada, with offices across various provinces. So obviously, depending on where you are, I can always link you with some of those capabilities to be able to provide you the information necessary to help you position better and compete in a global environment.
Fantastic. Certainly sounds like there's no shortage of resources, and of course the benefit of being cross-country. As we know, there's a lot of nuances between province and province, so being able to speak to those. A quick question, if I may. Nothing's come from our audience, but curious, you talked a lot about the digital adoption, and of course technology has been on the minds of many leaders in their organizations. How would you say, as an organization is thinking about further digital adoption and adding even more technology to smooth out processes, how can that adoption be measured? What would you say might be some metrics or KPIs that leaders should have on their radar when it comes to this?
Yeah, ultimately, when you're adopting technology, you have to know, as a business leader, the ROI, what's the return on investment ultimately. And that obviously a measure that the business leader would be able to focus on, say, is my ROI a year, 3 years, ultimately to get that. But you can have a multiplicity of effects as well. It's not only the financial gains as a result. If I'm investing X, this is what I'll yield on that. But also customer satisfaction, it becomes important in terms of maintaining your customer and expanding broadening the base of your customers in that space. But I would say there are that many, is the quality, assuming you're in the manufacturing, is your yield of the products improving? Is the time to market improving as well as you're producing? That means your supply chain, your inventory, but also the manufacturing, all working in harmony and leveraging a lot of the data, but also the algorithmic capabilities of AI to be able to do better planning, better forecasting of what raw materials you need and how do you manufacture it, how do you provide the yield. So it depends on the industry, but every industry has a good idea of, if you're in a manufacturing, you're going to look at your yield, the efficiency in manufacturing, time to market is going to play into that. But also, it speaks to, not only the efficiency, but the return on investment, ultimately. If I'm putting X, how is that yielding? And am I also expanding as an organization? Give you an example. I started my career in the pharmaceutical industry in automation robotics in Switzerland. And we started, automation in some other plants. Obviously, even those, at the time, there was a fear that these, the automation robotics is going to reduce the number of staff within the organization. I can give you an indication that in the 5 years I was there, there was a plant manufacturing with around 80 individuals. By the time I left the organization 5 years later, there were 3 plants with high quality, high products, yields to expand markets in not only in Europe, but in Asia, with around 420 employees. So technology, they may have an immediate effect in terms of the staffing, but a very short term, because ultimately businesses don't invest to minimize the number of staff. They invest for the long term to try to increase the yield, to enhance their productivity, to expand in markets.
That's always a concern of organizations, and certainly the employees. Will technology replace me, and what does that look like? So I'm glad that you started to address that.
Yeah, I mean, to expand on that, I mean, in fact, even data 2019, obviously the data have changed. But if you look at the most advanced economies that use much of their automation robotics, you know, at the time in 2019, whether it's Germany, South Korea, the US and others, they had the lowest unemployment rate. So it gives you an indication. I think where the critical component of automation and robotic and setting an economy in the next number of years for that is the catalyst is going to be the academic institutions. Are you able to reskill and upskill quite fast? I mean, in fact, we are doing an initiative, and I'll close on that, in Calgary at the moment with Calgary Economic Development called Edge Up. You can see it online, to help some of the oil and gas, you know, displaced oil and gas workers that we started two and a half years ago, transition to high growth part of the economy. And as you know, Alberta actually has around 3,000 digital companies now in this. So I think the growth in the digital space in Alberta has quite been flagrant, you know, quite substantive on that. And we're seeing the reskilling and working with academic institutions and post-secondary education for short duration training has helped tremendously into shifting that workforce. And I think it's going to be important for an economy like us in the future, because every economy with these mega trends that I talked about are seeing structural transformation. So we need to position ourselves in terms of how do we adjust and how do we rebuild our talent? What technologies that we need to adopt? How do we shift to meet the demands of the new markets, not only nationally, but internationally?
Thank you. I'm going to ask a question that I missed a little bit earlier. Comes from Ian, and I'm going to read it as is. You've touched upon this a little bit, but would be curious if you could expand. Wondering if you can provide additional granularity as to how businesses are investing in the digital economy. Ian goes to say, this would appear to cover a huge range of technologies, from the tactical, such as the remote worker support, to the strategic, AI, machine learning, data-driven decision making. Any sense that you could share with the audience for which areas in particular smart businesses are focusing on?
Yeah, I mean, it's a definitely a very critical area, because you've got, you know, the technologies that help the workplace environment, and specifically that we moved into a remote work as much as possible, specifically if you're in the knowledge space, compared to, you know, manufacturing, that you have to have people on you know, on the shop floor, compared to also, you know, the technologies you need to energize your business ultimately. The spectrum of technology adoption, frankly, that we've seen in the last 3 years has been significant across all industry verticals. We've seen it in the construction, you know, the BIM technology, but also the virtual and augmented reality, building information management, the BIM, but virtual and augmented reality. We've seen it in the health sector, rapid adoption, the manufacturing with lights out and robotics, that we've seen that the retail industry realized that they need to move fast into the e-commerce and expand their capabilities, not only nationally, but internationally in that space. And the list goes on. And obviously, even the agricultural industry has been a great adopter of artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, because they can manage crop yield, look at the watering capabilities, and basically respond to the market as well in terms of the supply chains on that. But I would say it's been quite significant, the adoption of technology, but ultimately there isn't a specific technology or that fits everything. Ultimately, it's a business decision that has to be a reflection of where I am now, what are the market opportunities in the future, and how to position better. Do I have bottlenecks in my supply chains? Excuse me, that I need to address. Do I need to look at my inventory control? Is my manufacturing side well automated? Whether you're in the batch processing or continuous processing, all of these are determinations of the business needs that then dictate what type of technology. Are you adopting blockchain? Are you adopting artificial intelligence? Do you need forecasting capabilities? Do you need algorithmic? And that the artificial intelligence will provide, as much as the health sector is adopting these. So it depends on the business. But I mean, to close on that, I think every sector of the Canadian economy is seeing quite rapid adoption of technologies.
Thank you. And thank you, Ian, for that question. Namir, I don't see any further questions. Thank you so much for spending the last 50 minutes with us and sharing such a wealth of information and knowledge. Of course, anyone who didn't have the opportunity to catch us live today, we will have this webinar posted on our website within the week, and of course our YouTube channel, and we'll certainly direct them to your website where they can access a lot of the resources that you had talked about for vast sectors and industries across Canada. So thank you again. Is there anything that we didn't cover today that you'd like to share with our audience just as we wrap up?
I think we covered a large range of parameters, but if I would conclude, I would say, there are a couple of factors and catalysts for the success of business, going forward. Double down on technology, understand your data, look at reskilling and upskilling. Obviously, invest in global markets. This is your entry into much more, capabilities in terms of expanding in scale and scope. Make sure you protect your IP as you go into international markets as well. And I think if you start by understanding your business and the capabilities of your business, things will materialize and you'll have a better strategy going forward. So, I wish all the business all the best of success in the future. We're here to help. If I can add more information and my staff, please reach out to me and we'll be delighted to help you.
Thank you very much, Namir. Thank you for joining us again. And thank you everyone who tuned in or is watching this later. Again, you can catch this webinar recorded on our website, tech-canada.com, or on our YouTube, search Tech Canada, TEC Canada. Thank you again. Have a wonderful day and appreciate you joining us. And thank you again, Namir.
Thank you. All the best.